Greetings from the channel again. Phoenix Recap. Now I'm going to explain an American heist comedy film going in style, directed by Zach Braff and written by Theodore Melfi. The film is a remake of the 1979 film of the same name and stars Morgan Freeman, Michael Caine, and Alan Arkin. Joe is an elderly man, who is first introduced to us at the start of the film. He has an appointment with Chuck, the bank manager, at Williamsburg Savings Bank. According to Chuck, Joe is in default and will soon have to mortgage his home because he lives there with his daughter and grandchildren. His inability to accept it. Suddenly Pers orders everyone in the bank to lie down and be quiet while some robbers rush the building and begin their extremely peaceful robbery. Chuck now makes some noises that the gang leader notices. He walks into the space where Chuck and Joe are and helps Joe to sit down. After learning about Joe's present financial difficulties, he feels sympathy for Joe, which was brought up by the bank. Joe notices the leader of the gang having a Mongol warrior tattoo on his neck. Soon after, to the right, quick robbers flee with bags of cash. Jewish people are called to the police station in the scene that follows. He discloses the tattoo to FBI agent Hamer. After noticing the robber's neck, Joe proposes that Hamer identify the bank robber by his tattoo and advises him to watch the crime drama Law and Order on television. However, Hamer explains to him, solving a crime is taking much longer than a 1-hour TV show. Later on, Joe is accompanied home by his family. As Joe tells his granddaughter about the bank robbery, she is intrigued and thinks that it is so cool being in the middle of a heist. However, her mother soon interrupts him. She thinks there is nothing cool about it. The next day he gathers with his two lifelong. Albert and Willie soon learn about the bank robbery as well, via a newspaper. Albert supposes that nobody gets hurt, except the insurance company after the bank robbery, and they will never find the gang. In intrigued tone, Joe describes the scene to his friends, saying that the robbers' actions were very quick and skillful. Later on, Willie shows Joe an envelope of pension debt that all three of them received their company lures steal. In the next scene, the trio shows up in a meeting with other senior workers from the company. The manager reports that the company has to move all to Vietnam. Since the cost of operation is rising, Joe shows the pension debt to the boss and questions what will happen with his pension. However, the manager tells them that the company has frozen and their pensions are dissolved. After learning such news, Joe and the other workers express their anger and disappointment. Stored the company. After that, the trio gather in a cafeteria or frequently meet. Indeed, without the pension, it has made their life much more challenging. They don't even have enough money for a proper meal. In the meantime, Joe is inspired by the bank robbery and keeps telling his friends about it in the evening after enjoying a meal with Albert in Willie's place. Joe reaches home and receives a notice of default from the bank. Joe is hit hard as he finds out that he will be homeless in 30 days, along with his daughter and granddaughter. The following scene shows Willie is having a health check in the hospital as Willie's kidney failure is getting worse. The doctor advises him to ask for a kidney donor from his family members. More importantly, he needs to do a kidney transplant as soon as possible before he could die from it. In a while, Willie gets home and has a video call with his daughter and granddaughter, whom he wishes to see more frequently as a gravely ill man. Willie is even more frustrated because he cannot afford to visit his family more often. The following scene shows Albert working as a saxophone teacher for a young boy. The boy's grandmother, Annie, and Albert are hitting on each other later. Joe's granddaughter shows him an scored exam. She asks him to give her a puppy as he promised her if she gets A's in every subject at school. The next day, the trio gathers again for Willie's birthday, along with other senior folks in their lodge. Albert gives Willie a wristwatch with a picture of his granddaughter on it as a birthday gift, and Albert invites Willie to join in on a bank robbery plan with him. Both of them are stunned. Joe states that the bank is taking his house. He practically destroys the country and crushes people's dreams. Joe emphasizes he decides to do something about it and adds that, in the worst scenario, they will be sent to jail, where they already are. A better life that night. After thinking twice, Willie rings and Joe agree to join the bank robbery plan. expressing that he needs to bear to see his family at least a couple of times a year when Joe requests that Albert join. Albert's excuses. The following day, Albert drove Joe and Willie to the grocery store to search for the chicken and blew his nose. He was holding up his shirt outside. Joe and Willie got to the store, and Albert began shoplifting, stressing for his companions. Albert follows them and runs into anyone who works. Here, minutes after the fact, Joe and Willie figured out how to take a few things. Escape while a security official finds out and pursues them. Right now, Joe takes a crate from an elderly person and drives away with Willie. While Albert is gotten by another security fellow, as Joe and Willie are out and about, they almost hit transport and are captured too. After being let out of the grocery store, Albert is embarrassed about his friends and drives away, leaving Joe and Willie to prepare a better plan. Joe decides to search for Murphy. Jose, ex-son-in-law, Joe asked Murphy to find him a criminal leaking and gives him advice for the bank heist. Returns to Albert, and goes to the grocery store, where he meets Annie. Albert later arrives at the cafeteria and reconciles with his friends after both have a little fun at Annie's house. Examining some recent news. The trio learns from the newspaper that their steel company will use their retirement funds to pay utility bills. Worse yet, Williamsburg Savings Bank will manage the corporate debt, which means that the bank will take their pension money. Albert has had enough and immediately agrees to join his friends to rob the bank. They decide to take it back. They eventually come into contact with the criminal Jesus, who takes what is rightfully theirs. And soon after they come to talk to him on behalf of the trio, Joe convinces Jesus to help them with the plan, and in return, Joe will give him 25% of the amount. He robs the bank, and Jesus agrees to join them as Joe only has 20 days before being kicked out of his house. Jesus tries to teach the trio that, for every lesson, they need to rob a bank first. They start by outlining the plan, then pick the getaway vehicle. They will prepare by getting in shape physically. And the most crucial thing is to prepare a solid alibi, which they use at their largest carnival as a cover for 20 days of the past. And it's D-Day at 2:14 p.m., the trio is in the carnival. And soon, they decide to take action at 2:30 p.m. Will he drive a bus and take the trio to the bank? The robbery happens just like what they had planned before. Albert sets the timer and uses a gun to control everyone in the bank. Joe and Willie go to the clerks and take all the money. Things go smoothly until a young girl offers to tell no lies at all. At this point, Willie comes to the girl and eases her down in a few seconds, grabs the opportunity, and calls the police. Willie abruptly sits down for a while as he recovers from it before checking on the young girl. The young child partially removes his mask. She also observes Willie's watch, which features a picture of his granddaughter. Seconds later, as Joe and Albert help Willie get up, Chuck grabs the gun and threatens to leave the money behind. However, he misses while attempting to shoot the trio. Joe pulls his gun out and shoots non-stop in Chuck's direction, leaving Chuck terrified and yelling hysterically. Eventually, the trio gets on the truck and runs off from the scene with $3 million that night. They celebrated at a fine dining restaurant where Albert plays saxophone. The party ends shortly and the trio comes home on the way. Willie passes out due to kidney failure. The next day, Hamer, the FBI agent, has already discovered Willie's figure on the camera and suspects that he must have committed a crime. Around 60 seconds later, in the meantime, Albert and Joe bring Willie to the hospital and eventually find out about Willie's health problem. Now, Willie needs a kidney transplant as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Hammer shows up at the grocery store. The manager shows him Albert's walk from the video surveillance cameras. He notices that the figures in both videos are strikingly similar. The next day, Albert noticed cops approaching his front door. After the cops also find Willie and Joe, they are arrested on suspicion by the FBI shortly after Hamer starts to interrogate them. The trio sticks to their alibis as they have prepared before. We have a little flashback to yesterday, when it turned out that Joe went to the ticket room, swamped his hand with his fellows, and sneaked out successfully. And as for Willie, he went to the haunted house, changed his costume, got away from Albert, and went to the public toilet. He sneaked out and quickly got on the bus after finishing off the trio, stopped by Jesus for money laundering to find the suspects. Hamer takes the trio along with other senior suspects into a police lineup using the child witness to identify Willie after she walks and looks carefully at each of them for a while. She realizes the watch on Willie's hand but refuses to identify him, leaving Hamer with no answer. Cut to a few days later. Joe and Jesus show up in the cafeteria, in Jesus' hands. Joe has a cage with a puppy inside. To Joe, surprise. It is revealed that Jesus is the leader of the robbers from the robbery Joe witnessed. He gives Joe $3 million and refuses to take the money from Joe. Jesus also reveals to Joe that the tattoo he saw the other day is just a temporary tattoo to trick the police. All of a sudden Hamer also shows up at the cafeteria and returns to the wallet. He forgot. After some small talk, Hamer sits down and plays with the puppy in the cage where Jesus hides the money. Their conversation is cut short as the puppy bites the Hamer's finger. Now Joe calmly takes the cage and leaves along with Jesus and Hamer. Later on, the trio sends a suit is full of cash to help their friends, co-workers, and fellows at the lodge. Days later, Willie has his kidney donated by Albert. At the end of the movie, Albert and Annie get married in the trio celebrate their fortune. The end. That was all from the video. I hope you liked it. Subscribe for more content. Like this and hit the like button to help us out. Also, leave a comment if you want us to recap your favorite movie. Until next time, take care.